Hello friends and viewers to another episode of Critical Analysis. Here at Critical Analysis, I strive to bring interesting content for your viewing pleasure, and as such, today we will be talking about an up-and-coming game from the studio Riot Games, only known as Valorant. Unlike the other games Riot has put out up until this day, Valorant is a staple for the company. Unlike the other games in their folder, Legends of Runeterra, TFT, and a few other projects, Valorant is the first game that exists without riding the coattails of League of Legends. Of course, Skrulls does exist as well, but we'll put that off to the wayside given that it was a failed project from the get-go. Valorant is a new world, with new characters, new designs, and an entirely new playstyle for Riot Games fans. But what is Valorant exactly? Well, simply put, League of Legends is to Dota 2 as Valorant is to CSGO. While Dota 2 has a high skill floor and an exceedingly high skill cap, League of Legends has a low skill floor and a deceptively high skill cap. This design is what Riot excels at creating thus far. Riot is extremely good at creating a balance between casual and competitive mindsets in their games, allowing new and casual players to have fun while allowing competitive players to rise to glory within it. And Valorant is, thus far, a perfectly good example of how they do that. Valorant is, for lack of better terms, the combination of CSGO's high lethality gunplay, mechanics, economy, and map structure with Overwatch's character structure and art style. But let's talk about the gameplay first. Somehow, Riot has managed to do something quite spectacular here with Valorant. Something that I didn't really even think was possible. They somehow managed to create an environment where player mechanics, map knowledge, and economy are just as important as the characters and their skills. It's a very delicate balance, one that could easily sway in the direction of either player skill, i.e. Rainbow Six Siege, or character kits, i.e. Overwatch. And while Rainbow Six relies heavily on the player skill over the character kits, and vice versa for Overwatch, Valorant exists on a scale, tipping to one side or the other depending on the team economy, the player mechanics, and the well-timed use of their skills. The clever use of a character skill can swing a game's momentum in your favor, or give you a massive advantage in an outnumbered scenario. You are still, however, very likely to lose a game to players who are just mechanically better than you. But unlike CSGO, the clever use of the skills available to you can make up for mechanical and game sense downfalls. But of course, at the end of the day, it is still map knowledge, weapon control, game sense, and team communication that wins games. All the things that make Counter-Strike such an amazing game to begin with. In fact, it is so similar in nature that I put down Counter-Strike and picked up Valorant with almost no hiccups whatsoever, save finding the correct sensitivity for the game and finding the right character. It's a fucking brilliant design. Personally, I think that most of the characters are very well polished and uniquely interesting to play, with the exception of one character in particular. While it has a lot in common with Overwatch character-wise, a lot of the abilities actually follow closer along the lines of Rainbow Six Siege operators, offering deeper levels of utility in the gameplay rather than simply giving their characters the tools to murk people outright. It's not about the lethality of your character's abilities, but the utility of them, and how you can use them to gather information, create pressure, and create lethality. I personally enjoy characters like Sova and Cypher, characters that are designed to gather information on the enemy in advance. It makes up heavily for my lack of game sense in the game, and allows me to play based on the information gathered rather than sheer mechanical prowess. But that's just me. Even with such a small roster, I can almost guarantee that anyone who plays Overwatch or CSGO can pick this game up and find someone who is interesting and fun to play relative to their playstyle. The character designs are different enough from each other that they typically feel much different from each other in gameplay. Some are focused on intelligence, while others are focused on brute force, while some still are focused on agility in combat. Well, that is, except for one character so far. After watching quite a few hours of gameplay and playing quite a few more hours, I believe that Raze is a little bit overpowered as a kit, and I'm not really alone in this belief. Raze is the only character in the game that has 4 damaging abilities, the worst of which requires 0 control over your aim or character. The main issue with this is that it is really the only character in the game that you are forced to play around as a player. She is the only character in the game that I would really consider to be a quote-unquote fragging hero. And while it's okay to have fragging heroes in your game, I would not say that it doesn't feel a little off for the dynamic this game is trying to create. People who play her always seem to be more likely to jump out into enemy fire haphazardly, as if they were playing Overwatch meta while everyone else is playing CSGO meta. And in all regards, she breaks the established meta of the game. And she is the only character that does this. The bigger issue I have really, though, is that we aren't really sure that Raze was a special case. Raze came out with the beta, with 0 information on her as to what she was when she dropped. And while she doesn't have as much of an effect on games as people like to try and say she has, her existence worries me just a bit about where Riot is going to take the meta of the game. If they start adding more of these fragger hero class types, it could definitely impact a delicate balance between the character skills and player mechanics that the game currently has. And I think that impact would be for the worst. The more lethal utility you add to the game, the more the meta will swing towards relying on those skills as opposed to relying on corner angles, mechanical prowess, and game sense. Character skills should be utility, things that you use to get an edge on your opponent, not the entire reason you beat your opponent in the first place. While basically all of the other character designs in the game follow this base meta set, the existence of Raze as a character makes me nervous that there are some internal differences in what the meta of the game should be. But until we start seeing character after character breaking the meta at hand, I suppose it's not too much to worry about. It could only really go one of 2 ways at the moment. Either they could double down on Raze's fast and loose game style with more characters that play the same way, or they could nerf her abilities and bring her down to the level the meta is at. I would opt for the latter, as the game's current meta and playstyle are just about perfect in my opinion. It has barely been a week or 2 into the beta of Valorant, and we're already seeing teams being pulled together and signed on for its inevitable competitive release. And while I'm a bit fearful that the game and community are moving a bit too fast for their own good, I'm happy that this is already being talked about and built up. If everything goes as planned, Valorant is poised to devastate the player and viewer population of every other major competitive first-person shooter and relevance today. I do not say this lightly. Many players have already moved over from games like CSGO, Rainbow Six Siege, and Overwatch to what is effectively a beta of a similar game. And when the game is finished and everything is set in place, many more people will move over. But what really excites me about Valorant is not the traction that it already is pulling, but the company behind that traction. The Riot Games studio is fantastic at creating and maintaining a competitive environment around its games. And while this is definitely a trek into a new genre, I maintain a positive mindset that Riot can and will make something just as great as League of Legends out of this. This, of course, will take time, but I never thought I would be lucky enough to see the rise of a competitive game powerhouse like League of Legends again. I personally hope that they will pump a very large investment into the first major tournament they run and skip over the 10 or so years it took League of Legends to get to the Super Bowl-like status that it is in today. But I can only hope for something like that. It is far more reasonable and far more likely that Riot Games will let Valorant grow at its own pace like they did for its predecessor. In the end, I believe that Valorant is a damn fun and damn well-made first-person shooter that has a bright future ahead of it. And through the extremely clever use of the times we now live in, as well as Twitch to spread its beta keys and build its reputation, as well as helping streamers in the community. It has had a lot of eyes on it, and I for one am extremely excited to be able to once again see the beginnings of another Riot Studios game and be able to follow it as it rises up to fame, bringing with it another wave of recognition to esports as a genre. And I think everyone who is interested in esports or the FPS genre should be following this game closely as it evolves. Thank you all for watching once again. If you enjoyed this look at Valorant, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Look alive, stay alive, my friends. There are hard times we live in, but together we'll make it through.